Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Unstoppable Mindset. Today, we're going to have some fun. We've got a really interesting person to chat with, Haley Cooper, unless you talk to her mom, and sometimes her mom pronounces it Hallie Cooper. But and my computer, by the way, with JAWS pronounces it Hallie, but I'm smart enough to know that it's really Haley. But Haley, Hallie, tomato, tomato. I couldn't resist. Well, anyway, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset, Haley, and we're really glad that you're here with us.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. It's so good to be here, and I'm so glad that we found a time that has worked for us, and I'm just delighted and honored to be able to chat with you.
And on top of everything else, sports fans, Haley lives in Lake Forest, California, which is only, what would you say, about from Victorville, probably about 60 miles, no more than.
Yeah, maybe I could throw you a football.
Yeah. Well, or probably easier for me to throw something from here because we're up higher.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, you'd have to throw way uphill. But Haley lives fairly close to where I attended college at University of California at Irvine. And then we lived, my wife and I, in Mission Viejo for a while. So anyway, we're really glad you're here with us. And I want to thank you for joining us. So why don't we start, the fun way to start, tell us about kind of the early Haley growing up and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I've been reflecting on that. And, as I've been listening to your podcast episodes, I'm like, what is my story? Who is Haley?
Who is Haley anyway?
Who is the real Hallie?
Will the really Hallie stand up?
There you go. Well, obviously I grew up in Orange County, and I grew up in a really good family that, my family was deeply committed to philanthropy and giving back to the community. It's been a part and ingrained in my life from as early as I can remember. My grandparents would always invite us to ballet shows. They were a part of an organization called the St. Joseph Ballet that is now the Wooden Floor. And, reflecting back, I'm like, now I'm a nonprofit leader, which we'll get to. Like, I didn't understand philanthropy. I just understood that it was a way of life. I also grew up in the Christian church. And so service and giving to others and helping others is just ingrained in me. And, aside from service with my family, I loved playing sports, grew up running cross country and track, played soccer, was a very active child, loved to play. I'm one of 5 children, and with my 2 parents. And I just, remember as a child, volunteering, and aside from playing sports, volunteering with my family. And, from a young age, I was exposed to the importance of that and making a positive impact on the world.
So where did you grow up? Around Lake Forest or where?
I grew up in Laguna Niguel.
So still right in the area.
Yeah, and I went to, from preschool to 12th grade, I went to the same school, St. Margaret's in San Juan Capistrano. And it's funny because one of my very best dear friends is my friend from preschool. So we've been friends for, I won't date myself, but 36 years.
That's okay. Nothing wrong. Don't be ashamed. I was born in 1950. You can do the math.
Yeah.
So I'm not ashamed by it. It's okay. Well, that's pretty cool. I did student teaching when I took teacher training at UC Irvine from the Teachers College there, University High in Irvine. So that was kind of fun. Yeah,
we played them in soccer.
Who won?
We did.
Okay, no.
Actually, I think it was I remember them being pretty competitive, but I would like to remember that we kicked their butts, if I'm allowed to say that.
Now we need to get somebody on from University High from back in those days.
Yeah.
And see what we can do. So we need to get somebody from somewhere in the 1990s and so on to come on and see if we can get a real story. So
there you go. 2 sides of the story, right?
Unless they say, yeah, they really kicked our butts.
Well, I hope they remember it the way I do.
So what did you major in college?
Yeah, so I went to St. Mary's College of California in Moraga, California, up in the
Mm-hmm.
East Bay, and I studied kinesiology, health and human performance. That's what I graduated with my bachelor's degree in. And I love science, all things science. I love learning how the body works and being able to help others implement that. Well, I don't necessarily do that now. Um, but yeah.
So was the Big Bang Theory one of your favorite TV shows?
Yes, I do like that show.
Just checking. Just making sure
The
you stayed.
quirkiness of that show. But
Oh,
yeah,
I
I
know.
really, like I said, I was always involved in sports and it was a part of my lifestyle growing up. Um, and somehow my dad has 5 kids, but was able to make it to every single person's that soccer game or sports event. Sometimes we were playing at the same time on the same field, but he was able to make it to all. So being able to leverage that in college, and it was something that I was really excited about. And I really enjoyed, it was one of the only colleges at the time that offered that major specifically on, there were different tracks that you could take, but I chose health and human performance and really enjoyed it.
Now, did you say health and humor performance?
health and human performance.
Humans. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That was just making sure. Well, that though is pretty interesting. Why did you choose that?
So, like I said, sports was heavily involved in my upbringing. My dad had also graduated with a degree in exercise physiology. And so it was just something that, I was passionate about and found interest in and was able to excel in. And so I really, I just like the aspect of learning how the body works and being able to help that other people implement healthy lifestyles.
Cool. Well, and why did you? Well, what drove you to doing that? Was it just your upbringing that you just felt that was kind of a way to give back a little bit? Do you think?
I think so. So I actually entered college as a communications major because that's what I thought I wanted to do. But looking back, I'm glad I did not go down that road because that is just it was just not for me. And I found I found this, and I think it was because of my upbringing that really was instrumental in helping me choose this major and get interested in and specifically, I really liked physiology and exercise physiology. And what we would do as our final project as a senior was developing, like we had all the you could do the water weight. I forget what it's called, but like weigh yourself underwater, and that's the most accurate way to weigh yourself. And then we did different activities, and we were able to prescribe exercise and nutrition plans based on the measurements that we took.
So how do you weigh yourself underwater? I've never thought about that.
College was a long time ago, so I have to remember.
There you go.
But you sit on a chair and you go underwater, and I think it takes out everything. I wish I remembered what now I'm gonna have to Google it. But yeah, I think it's the most accurate way because it takes out all the other like fluid and buildup that you can get on other scales.
Interesting. I'm going to have to Google that and learn about that myself. That would be kind of fun to do. But it makes sense. As you say, it takes out a lot of other things. So
yeah, it says it's the most accurate way to measure body fat. You're submerged in water while you sit on a scale, and then you calculate your body fat percentage.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm going to have to go see where I can do that.
Yeah. Maybe at your local gym. I don't know.
Possibly. So you graduated from college, and then what did you go off and do?
So I was sitting in my parents' church in Aliso Viejo, California, right when I graduated college, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And on stage, someone was like, "Hey, we're doing a missions trip to Malawi, Africa. Does anyone want to go? All we ask of you is to sponsor children through World Vision, and then, obviously raise the money." I think it was about $2,500 to go on the trip, and that included the flight, the stay, the food, everything. And like I said, my family was philanthropically locally. We had never really traveled outside of the country. I'd been to England once when my older sister studied abroad there. But again, it was very local. And I was like, hey, mom and dad, guess where I'm going this summer? I was like, I'm going to Malawi. And they're like, Haley, what? Like, where did you get that idea from? And, when I graduated from college, people were inclined to give me gifts or money. That was part of my family tradition, but I asked them to give me money to go towards this trip. And so in August of 2012, August 2011, sorry, that's when I graduated college. I went on my first trip to Malawi, Africa. And honestly, before I went, I had to Google where the country was because it's this little sliver of Africa and this little country next to Tanzania and Mozambique and Zambia. And I went there and my eyes were just opened. Someone who grew up in Orange County, just opened up to a different way of living, a different lifestyle. And it really changed my life. And I came back, and I think after 2 weeks or, you go on a retreat, you go on a missions trip, you get back into the daily life and you kind of forget that invigorating feeling and that joy that you experience. Obviously, there was a lot of hardship. But on that trip, we did a lot of discipleship. We hosted games for kids. We went and did gospel outreach in the communities, met with chiefs, and got to know the community. And after that, I came back and I was living at my parents' house, working at a local coffee shop. It was right kind of in the middle of the recession, so finding jobs was hard. And I was applying to colleges to become a registered dietitian, and I kept getting denial after denial, and it just was not working out. That's the path that I thought I wanted to go down. And I remember one night that I just broke down. And like I said, I'm a Christian. So I said, God, like, give me an answer. I will submit to you. Like, show me something that you want me to do, because this is not working out. And what I want isn't working. And that literally that next day, the guy who had led the missions trip called my dad, because they were good friends at the time, and was like, hey, does Haley want to go make peanut butter in Malawi for a year? And I went to go, my dad was like, hey, like, do you want to do this? So I met with the guy he was a former lawyer, and I met in his office, and he presented me the idea. And I was like, yes, send me, I will go. And this is about 8 months after my initial trip. And he was like, Haley, literally go home and pray on it. Like, you got to think about this overnight. And I was like, nope, what are we doing? How are we doing this? And this really evolved out of this idea that, with the original missions trip that we went on, they were trying to end malaria deaths for all children under 5. But they found that these children were still passing away because they didn't have the nutrition to be able to fight disease. And the original founder had heard about this company on 60 Minutes with Anderson Cooper about a ready-to-use therapeutic food that was making tremendous difference in children experiencing malnutrition. So I got out my mom's KitchenAid mixers in her kitchen, and luckily this company who had developed this product gave us the formula, obviously with the agreement that if we ever sold it, they would get a royalty off of it. But I started making peanut butter in my parents' kitchen. And in August of 2012, I moved to Malawi for about 2 years, and then went back and forth for 2 years, leading missions trips and checking on the mission. And then I literally started, I always like to say this as like a fun fact, is I literally started a peanut butter factory from scratch and learned how to make it UNICEF approved. So my last trip was to Copenhagen to a UNICEF conference that was on this product to literally, they're kind of like the FDA, if you will, like of regulation for this product. And there's very specific tests you have to do. We had to send our product to London to get it tested before we could give it out to people and get the test results back. Because some things in the peanut butter, because there is a milk powder in it, there could be bacteria, and also the way that people prepare the nuts there could be aflatoxin if they get wet, and people generally put rocks in it, or if they sell bags, they get them wet so that they weigh more.
They weigh more, yeah.
Yeah. So we actually started a co-op of peanut farmers that would then sell it to a business, and they would make the good price, and then they would blanch and roast them for us. And then we had a whole factory that we developed that was next to a hospital. Meanwhile, while I'm building this, I'm also living in an apartment with 3 other German ladies, and we didn't have water. We didn't have water in our apartment. So we had someone who would come and clean our house daily. She also made the most amazing bread. And she would go to the well and get us water each day, and we would have to heat it up and heat it up in the water heater, and then we would take a bath out of the bucket. And so that's how I lived. And then we were finally able to get water. But yeah, it was a really amazing and hard experience. I think I learned a lot about, I was 24 at the time, so a lot about myself and a lot about other people's cultures and how to really work with a diverse group of people.
Mm-hmm. How well was the whole mission effort, especially at the beginning, how well was it accepted? Was there a lot of skepticism as you came in and wanted to start this whole manufacturing process and all that? Or did people feel that it made perfect sense, or what?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we had to get approval by a few people. So one was so there's a hierarchical system in the villages. And I remember we had to go to the so there's chiefs that run each village, and then there's like the chief of the chief. And we went to her house, and we had to bring her like 6 chickens and a goat or something. And we waited in her house, and we had to ask her for permission to start this. We weren't able to start it unless we had permission from her. And luckily she granted, we made the case that we were going to bring it out into villages, because a lot of people would travel at least 20 miles to go to the hospital. And we found that, they're waiting till the last minute. And so we wanted to go out into the healthcare centers and deliver this product to the healthcare screening, so that people didn't have to wait till the last minute, because if they're traveling, they're missing a day of getting water, cooking for their family. And so we were able to bring it out and get their approval. And then we obviously had to get the Malawi government approval. And I think what else really helped was employing Malawian people to run the factory. So we wanted to get buy-in from the local people and be able to empower them to have jobs.
So were you able to see a difference that you made in the time that you were there because you started providing the peanut butter? And is it, you've referred to it as peanut butter, but you've also said it's a food. I guess there's a lot of other stuff in it. Isn't just peanut butter?
Yeah. So in the product, there's peanut butter. It literally tastes like the inside of a Reese's peanut butter cup, because there is sugar. There's sugar in it, milk, a protein powder, and I think that was all that was in it.
Okay.
So it is very nutritious. It's like in a packet. And each packet has 500 calories in it. So it was an enclosed package. So we had like this, we would put the peanut butter in it and then put it in the package and seal it. And we did, on an average of 2 weeks, like kids were making leaps and bounds. They were gaining weight. They were healthy. Healthy is a relative term.
Yeah.
Getting healthier from things. We also used it to help mothers with, or individuals with HIV tend to be more mothers that are identified, people with tuberculosis, so that they could fight the disease. And also for the people who are taking HIV medicine, they need that protein to be able to digest the medicine. And so we were seeing that, it really was working. And, we also partnered with another organization that would provide supplemental food called Lakuni Pala, to help supplement the rest of the family, because we did find that, if a kid is getting it, sometimes the family, everyone shares everything. And so we had to be able to supplement it so the kid could actually get the beneficial nutrients from that product.
Mm-hmm. Did they eat it straight, or did they put it on bread, or how was it generally taken in?
Both. So, just cut open the sachet and eat it, or they would mix it into their porridge, or they call it ensima, which is pretty much, it's kind of like a mashed potato bao bun kind of consistency. It's made of corn powder, and that's what they would mix it with.
Ooh, okay. But you certainly gained acceptance for providing this, and people realized that it was doing good for them.
Yes, I would agree with that statement.
So you did this for a couple of years, and then why? Well, does it continue today? Why did you leave, or did you feel that it had grown that to the point where it could go on without you, or what?
So it still does exist today. I have, like I said, I haven't been involved since 2016. And, I moved back after 2 years, and I got involved with our local AFP Association of Fundraising Professionals chapter, and really learned about fundraising and found that I really enjoyed it. And it just came to a time where I think, like you said, like it had grown to a point where I felt comfortable leaving and letting other people. There was a Malawian country director kind of run. And then there's another founder that from the US that kind of oversees it. Not the original founder, but one of the original founders does. And so, I had joined this AFP association, really got involved in the local community, and really that's really what started my fundraising journey over the last 10, 11 years. Is getting involved in the local community, mostly organizations serving people experiencing homelessness and youth experiencing homelessness and hunger.
So you came back, and what did you do first when you came back, or how did you evolve to what you're doing now? What did you start with, and what do you do?
So it was funny because as I was a founder and executive director right at 24, 25, 26.
Right.
And I had to start from the bottom again. I had to go back to being an entry-level development person, which is actually really beneficial because it helped me learn a lot about the ins and outs and intricacies of fundraising. So I was working for a local organization that was helping kids experiencing homelessness from kindergarten to 12th grade. And then I think they expanded to college because they found that the need was still great here locally. And since then, I've just gained really valuable experiencing by working in these fundraising roles, like starting from the bottom. My last role was as director of development. I've worked at both large and small nonprofits. So I have seen it all. And I've seen that I really, when I was in person, really enjoyed the grassroots organizations that, a lot of the ones that I had been hired at had been around for 30 years, but never prioritized fundraising. They'd been so focused on programs. And then they came to a point where they're like, well, we want to grow our programs, but we need fundraising. And fundraising is always a board term that people scare away from. And they're like, we don't like fundraising. We don't want to. I just did a board training last week, and they were like, we don't know anyone. We don't want to fundraise. And I was like, you're my favorite person. I'm going to get that mindset change. And, this experience just of working on all these levels of these different organizations just helped me understand like the challenges and opportunities and emotional whirlwind that it can be working in the nonprofit sector.
So let's talk about the whole idea of fundraising a little bit. I've been in professional sales basically all of my adult life, and I still think as a speaker, I'm in sales now. As I love to tell people, selling philosophy and life as opposed to computers, but still the sales process is there. I've met a lot of fundraisers, and I worked at Guide Dogs for the Blind, which is a pretty large charity up in Northern California, and one of the largest in California, and certainly the largest guide dog school in the country. And in dealing with all of the development folks up there and meeting a lot of people at the Association for Fundraising Professionals in San Francisco, they love to say fundraising isn't sales. It's totally different. and it's not the same, and you can't look at it the same. What do you think about that?
So I think there's aspects of fundraising that is salesy, and I think salespeople can come into fundraising roles and vice versa. I think the thing that is different is sales is based on a transaction. So it's based on getting a service in return and paying a price. I think in fundraising, what it should be, obviously some people still treat it as a transaction. It should be transformational. It should be helping people realize their greatest potential through your mission. And I had someone on my podcast last week talking about like helping people realize their generosity, helping people become their most generous selves, their highest potential, because we all know the benefits of generosity. We all know the benefits of giving. And my role is to help understand as a fundraiser what that looks like for you. And then once you give, reporting back to you how that's making a difference. So I think that's the difference. It's not just me asking you for money. It's me trying to figure out what your passions and interests are, how that aligns with our mission, and then helping you fulfill those passions and interests by investing in the area that you're interested in.
See, I have a slightly different view of sales, and my career in sales began when I was called into an office and I was doing basically different kinds of human factors studies for Ray Kurzweil and Kurzweil Computer Products, dealing with reading machine for the blind and other technologies, and finding out how to make them be better. And was called in one day and was told, well, we're having to lay you off because you're not a revenue producer and we need more revenue producers unless you want to go into sales. And what I chose to do was to go into sales. I felt that God was leading me to do that. I had moved to Boston and I didn't want to go off and try to find another job, especially when the unemployment rate among employable blind people back then, and still pretty much today, is in the 65 to 70% range. But anyway, I took a 10-week Dale Carnegie sales course. And what I learned is that real sales is, you can say that there's a transaction that takes place, but real sales is a lot more about being a teacher and a counselor, and learning what the customer needs and seeing what you can do, and if you can provide something to help meet those needs. And the reality is, I've had situations where I've done demonstrations for customers, and even going into the demonstration and conversing with them, learned that what we had wouldn't work for filling all of their needs. But I went ahead and did our product demonstrations for the purpose of saying, here's why what we have doesn't work. But the other side of that is, by doing that, I was also building trust and teaching people a lot about the technologies, so that oftentimes we would get calls sometime later saying, we have another project and we understand what your product does and it's perfect for what we want to do. So we're not even going to put it out for bid. Just give us a quote. But the reality is that the sales part is really more about teaching and developing a rapport, which is a lot of what happens in fundraising. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think a lot of salespeople don't realize that.
Yeah, that's valid. I like that. I like that reflection of what sales is. I think both in that the commonality is relationship building, and building that rapport before you go to the transaction. That is inevitable to happen if you've done your homework and you built that relationship.
Yeah, you got to do that. Otherwise, it doesn't work in the long run. And I've actually, as a public speaker now, I've met people who I sold to many years before, and they would come up to me and say, do you remember me? And sometimes I recognized their voices, but sometimes I didn't. But when they said who it was, we had all sorts of great conversations about it. But again, it was because of building the trust. And I think that's what real sales is all about. And the fact we're all, if we're really cognizant of what we do in life, we're all selling in one way or another. And a lot of times what we should be selling is being open to trust. and developing trusting relationships. And, we are seeing in our society so much today, a lack of trust, or a lack of even being open to trust, because the people that we should be trusting aren't doing anything to earn our trust, which is also an unfortunate thing.
Yeah, and I've seen that a lot in the nonprofit sector as well, of that lack of trust to giving. But I think, like you said, it is all about building that trust. And, on the board training I did last week, I was like, if you build that trust, if you build those relationships, because board members they're like, we don't like asking. I'm not going to ask people for money. And I was like, well, you don't have to ask for money. You can ask for advice, but the asking comes easy if you have built that trust, if you have built that relationship, because it is so aligned that it makes sense to ask that person if they're willing to give X amount of dollars, whatever it is. But it is all built on that trust and connection with the mission, with the person who's facilitating that investment, because otherwise people don't want to give.
Yeah. So the people you were training last week, what were some of the backgrounds of the people who said they didn't like to ask for money?
A lot of educational, higher ed professionals who felt like they did not have a network of people to ask. So, or the financial ability to give. But we know that there's more than financial ability. What I coached them on was asking for advice. So if you ask for advice, I don't know the quote, but if you ask for advice, people will give money. And so inviting people in, I don't remember the quote, but yeah, inviting people in and asking in a different way. And then also, could you give $5 a month instead of, we've all heard that, like, give $5 instead of purchasing a Starbucks drink, which is now like $10 for one. Yeah. Could you invite them to do like peer-to-peer fundraising? So it was people who felt they didn't really have assets now or the network now to be able to give. But I kind of did the bubble chart with them, where I was like, where do you hang out? Like, what do you do? Identify 1 to 2 people of where you hang out, whether that's like the gym, a religious place, a chamber of commerce, your workplace, your family, friends, and then tell them about the mission. Like, people don't like, my husband always has to remind me that I have a network of people that I can like talk to. Sometimes you just need that reminder that there are people out there.
Well, and another thing to look at is, what is teaching? Isn't that really a form of sales in a way? Because you're selling students on the idea of gaining knowledge, and the better teachers are the ones that can establish, again, that relationship and convey knowledge in a way that makes students want to pick it up. And if that isn't sales, I don't know what is. Well,
Anna, this organization is serving at Promise Youth, and it pairs college students with kids K through 8, or I think that's what it is. But they understand, what these youth experience. I mean, 1 in 5 students in California in the community college system are experiencing homelessness and hunger. So they understand it. So I'm like, well, you understand it at a level of the students that have come across you. So they have that level of passion and story that they can share from that level of knowledge.
I really do believe that the best salespeople are teachers, first and foremost. And I think that's also true for fundraising. Having been very much involved in development work for 6.5 years at Guide Dogs for the Blind, and it was fascinating to hear the development people say, this isn't a salesy thing at all. Well, they really need to maybe go back and look at things. But it's like so many things, people create their own mystique about what they do, rather than looking for the commonalities and ways to establish a more synergistic relationship.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go back to them and say, look, you're a teacher. You make the perfect fundraiser.
Well, yeah, I mean, look what you're doing. You're only trying to sell knowledge and convince people that they should learn this stuff. Why should they learn it? And that's actually an interesting thing in society. We're seeing all this stuff going on around the country, and whether it's book banning or all the other things, and people trying to talk about this whole concept of we can't have critical race theory, or we have so many different things. They're trying to, again, to sell stuff that makes no sense, or there are any number of good teachers who are trying to sell things that do make good sense. And I think the biggest thing that we can teach people is to really evaluate for themselves, which is another whole story, rather than just accepting even from the best teachers. The best teachers would tell you, go research it yourself and learn it, because ultimately teachers can't teach us. All they can do is convey the knowledge. We have to teach ourselves.
That's good.
I used to say I'm my own worst critic, and I realized earlier this year, actually, it's not the thing to say. I'm my own best teacher, because I am the one that's going to have to teach me to do whatever it is. And it's also a much more positive thing to say that.
Yeah, I like that perspective. And I think out of our own, it's always a learning opportunity, right? To teach us something.
Yeah. And that's just as much what fundraising is all about, because you're teaching people. You want them to give, but you also want them to understand what's going on. And it is so hard, I think, for so many people here to realize what it must have been like in Malawi and other places, because we've not really, as a society overall, experienced a lot of that. I haven't experienced a lot of the poverty that you have probably seen and other people have seen. And I've been to a number of countries, but I've seen enough that I can understand it and relate to it. And I've also seen how blind people and people with physical disabilities are oftentimes treated here. Again, because people don't know how to relate, and we're not doing enough to really educate people about some of these things to get them to the point where they would be maybe much more apt to want to contribute to address the issues.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think the role as a fundraiser is to educate. So educate people on the cause, because, like I said, I grew up in Orange County, and most people think of Newport Beach, but when it comes down to it, there's I don't know what the stat is now, but when I was working with youth-facing organizations, there are about 28,000 kids experiencing homelessness. And so you think of Disneyland, you think of Newport Beach. And so it was our role to explain what that looked like. Like, what does homelessness look like for a family? And also inspire and inform. So I think those are the three areas that we have the privilege of fundraisers or nonprofit professionals. It's part of our responsibility is to educate, inform, and inspire.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And maybe that's the most important part of the responsibility, because people have to start doing more thinking. And I certainly don't have any problem with somebody saying, well, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to check it out for myself. My response is go to it, but make sure you really check it out, and then let's talk about it. And you learn very quickly who really checks things out and who doesn't, but it still is the way to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's kind of fun. And I don't know, the world is an interesting place. And I think over time we'll see that people will, I think when they really think about it, will learn to investigate. But we've got to get back to encouraging people to do that. And one of the things I talk about a lot, and I mentioned it earlier, is the whole issue of trust. We have so many environments where trust is under attack in our country. And that's the difference between us and dogs, right? Dogs don't trust arbitrarily. They love unconditionally, but they don't trust unconditionally. But dogs are more open to trust, unless they've just been so abused. But typically dogs are much more open to trust, and they want to establish a trusting relationship. We need to learn how to do more of that ourselves.
Yeah, I heard you say that on another podcast. I don't remember his name. But you had mentioned that, and that piqued my interest. And I think, people have to do their due diligence, because there's so much stuff and readily access to things that you have to discern the truth for yourself and understand what is the truth, and facilitate that trust.
Yeah. It's important to do that. And that will also tell you and teach you who you can trust or not trust.
Yeah, that's true.
So anyway, so now do you work for yourself or do you work for a company or what?
So in 2022, I embarked on my entrepreneurial journey to start my own business. I am a mom of now 3 kids under 4, and working as a full-time director of development just wasn't realistic. One of my oldest son is adopted, and he had some developmental delays. And so all of 2022 was really dedicated to getting him services, and working full-time just wasn't realistic because as a fundraiser, you have to be available in mornings at all hours. And that just, becoming a mom, that just wasn't realistic. So I started my own business called the Savvy Fundraiser, and it's evolved in the last 2 years that it started. But, one thing that really I found, and I'm trained in a process called the EMC process. It's about emotional connection. And that's an area that, I help facilitate psychological safety and trust within teams. I've done the fundraising roles, I've done the fundraising trainings, but I truly believe that fundraising is an inside job. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to understand the language of emotions. And also, it's always a twofold thing. Like, it's an individual thing, but it's also a systemic thing. Because burnout is so pervasive in our culture. People are leaving, there's high turnover, and that costs the sector a lot of money, and we're already limited resources. And so how can we better invest in our people and invest in ourselves to be able to do the work that we intend to do? So my focus right now is group coaching and creating masterminds. But like I said, I also do trainings that help create emotional connection and buy-in among staff members so that they can actually focus on their fundraising efforts. And part of that is, really understanding the language of emotions, because there's a lot of, nonprofits. It's an emotional whirlwind, like I said before, and we're seeing the hardest issues, and it can take us through, the depths of sadness and anger to profound joy, where I saw a kid getting healthy, or a kid having access to food so that they can focus at school and getting good grades, and graduating college. And I think, it's not just essential for our well-being, but it just building this idea of a culture of emotional connection and facilitating that within ourselves can actually increase your productivity. So that's where I'm at right now, is really focusing on this process and helping leaders understand the language of emotion and practice mindfulness practices so that they can get back to that creative state of being.
What does EMC stand for?
Emotional connection.
It is emotional connection.
Yeah.
So the EM is emotional and then connection.
That's right. And it was developed by Dr. Lola Gershfield, who is a mentor and coach of mine. And she developed it based on decades of experience. And, I found her in 2019, when I was in the midst of an organization that had a lot of burnout and stress, and I don't want to say toxicity, but that's probably too steep of a word, but there was just disconnection between team members, between me and the ED, and I'll totally own my part in that. But it was this lack of emotional disconnection where we no longer felt in the team that we were safe. We didn't really trust each other. We didn't feel seen or heard. And so, in those moments, productivity and effectiveness go down. So I sought out Lola, and I'm one of those people who likes to go all in. So I was like, I want to become a trainer in this process. I see this in multiple organizations where people are really reactive. And when, we go into that flight or fight response, your amygdala is activated and it takes over your prefrontal cortex, and you're no longer able to communicate or collaborate. So my role is to really help calm your amygdala so you can get back to doing the work that you do. And that's by naming specific emotions, because emotions are our high processing system. They tell us if we're in flight or fight mode. They help us go into that protection mode. And so they run fast. And so my job is to help you understand specific emotions, because from a science standpoint, it does help relax that amygdala and be able to turn on, like be able to reconnect with each other.
Well, and unfortunately, we're living in a world today where fear is all around us, and people market with fear, and they're doing things to stir up emotions. And again, people don't take the time to analyze, which is what really tends to drive people nuts after a while, because by not taking the time to slow down and be a little bit more mindful, they just become afraid or whatever. I'm actually writing a book called Live Like a Guide Dog, Lessons I Learned from 8 guide dogs in my life. I forget the exact wording of the subtitle, but the whole point is that we're basing it around lessons I've learned from working with 8 guide dogs about how to control fear. And the reality is that we don't need to be, as I would put it, blinded by fear. We can learn if we practice mindfulness, like you talked about, and if we really work at it, we can learn not to just go off the deep end just because something unexpected happens, like an airplane crashes into a building that we're in, or any number of other things, that we can learn to let that fear be a strong motivator and a guide and an incentive to us.
Yeah, I'll be interested to read that book, because I think fear is a huge thing in the nonprofit sector. I mean, especially as case managers or social workers, like if you're not on call, if you're working with the hardest issues, you're seeing the hardest issues, you're seeing people living on the street, you're seeing women being abused, you're seeing children being abused. And so if you're not working, like you're afraid that something bad is going to happen. And so you're in that flight and fight mode all the time, because you're so focused on that fear, which is a valid fear, obviously.
Which is a valid fear, but you
totally
can't,
valid, but you
can get beyond it and not let it be the only thing that drives you, rather than being more strategic.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, my cat says she's abused all the time, so I'm not sensitive to fear, but no, but I hear what you're saying, and you're absolutely right. And people who are very committed to the things that they do in the nonprofit world are very committed, because they appreciate it, they understand it, and they want to be successful, and can't argue with that.
Yeah, and I think when part of this process, we go through different stages, and one of them is about fear. So we ask, like, how do you feel it in your body? Emotions are stored in your body. And then, I walk through this process with a family member, because they were experiencing deep burnout. And I was like, what's your fear? Like, what are you fear about yourself, about the organization, about the relationship? And it was that they were going to let that person down, or the organization was going to run out of money. And once we were able to really understand where that fear was from and the emotions surrounding that, because this person was stuck, like they were not able to move forward, and there was a clear path ahead, but they couldn't get to that because they were stuck in that fear. So just by naming it and understanding how they thought that fear impacted their relationships and themselves, they were able to make a decision, and that decision was to leave the organization. But it just helped them see that bigger picture and be able to be like, oh, this makes sense, this is valid, but there's also another way.
We always think we have to be in control of everything, and the reality is there is so much that we don't directly have control over. And one of the lessons that I talk about, and I'm sure you've heard it on other podcasts where we've talked about it, is don't worry about the things that you can't control. Focus on what you can, because if you worry about everything else, you're just going to drive yourself crazy.
Yes, I'm a recovering control freak, so that applies to me.
Well, we all have some of that, and it is hard to let go, but it's important to learn to let go. Now, you said your oldest son is adopted. Tell me about that. That must have been quite a challenge to go through.
Yeah. So, prior to 2019, my husband and I have been married for 9 years now, I think 8.5. I don't know. I should do the math. And the first at least 5 years, we were like, we don't, well, specifically me, I was like, I don't want kids. Let's just live our life. But working in shelters and just seeing the heartbreak, really, and then, having a kid when I was in Malawi who was 12 and I was 24 at the time was like, I'm going home with you. You're going to adopt me. And, I think, if you are a believer, this is kind of God's call for me. He saved my life by going to Malawi, and then he really helped cultivate my heart for having children. And in 2019, I remember I was sitting in a shelter and I heard a mom who, had some mental health issues say her 5-year-old was too broken to be loved. And I was a fundraiser, so I wasn't really involved in the process, but I remember just breaking down and being so sad for that 5-year-old, and being every single child, and I mean parent too, deserves to be loved. And I went home, and foster care and adoption has been a story in my husband's side of the family. He has 2 adopted brothers. And I went home to him and I was like, hey, guess what we're doing? We're going to become foster parents. And he was like, that just came out of left field. What? Like, who are you? Are you my wife? And he's like, if you do the homework, I will go on this journey with you. So we decided to go through the county, and it took us about 9 months, 6 to 9 months to do all the training. You have to do a number of trainings. And, it always broke my heart when you saw the movies or the, show, like they had a number of videos of children who were like, yeah, we were fostered, but every time the parents went on vacation, they would leave us home. We weren't allowed to go with them. And, as this process, we wanted to really take in a child and love them and give them the experiences that they deserved. And we became certified in March of 2020 when everything shut down. We literally got the notice like 2 days before everything shut down, and our social worker was like, there's no kids in the system. And whether that's because they were all fostered out, there's about 3,000 children at any given day in the foster care system in Orange County. So, or they weren't being identified because they weren't in school or after school activities, and that's where a lot of kids get identified. So we were just kind of sitting with the certification at home, trying to figure out what to do and praying about it. And because we wanted a baby. And I get a call about a month later from my uncle, who was like, hey, a family member had her child taken away. And he had seen that I had posted it on Facebook that I was a foster care parent. And so about in May of 2020, May 21st, 2020 is when we met our son. I will never forget it. He was so happy. We had to meet him in mass until we got into the car. We couldn't kiss him like in front of the social workers. We had to drive down to San Diego. And we picked him up, and he's been in our family ever since. So we officially adopted him on my birthday 2 years ago. So I got engaged on my birthday and adopted a child on my birthday. No, I tell my husband adoption was a better gift, but don't tell him that.
Wow. Tough crowd
I'm just
here.
kidding. I'm just kidding. Both are wonderful gifts.
Where is he anyway? Yeah, go ahead.
He's listening. He's probably in the other room. And so, yeah, I was so happy that we were able to, and it was funny because we hadn't gotten any calls. And the day that I got him, that next week, the next 5 days, I got a call each day saying, hey, because we were emergency parents too. So we said, like, if there's someone who's just born, we will take them out of the hospital, like fresh baby. And, the challenge is you don't know what's going on. You don't know if they were on drugs, whatever. I literally got a call every single day that week asking if we would take like a sibling pair, or because we always said we would take sibling pairs too. So I had to put our foster care on pause because now I have 3 kids. And it's funny, last week I actually got a call from our new social worker, and I was like, I'm not ready to open that door yet. I don't think it's closed. I think we probably will in the future, but it's a really beautiful journey, and I'm so glad that he entered our life first and really feels like he's my son. He's only called me mom, and every time I pick him up from school and he runs with a big smile saying mommy, I just don't take it for granted. And I'm just so grateful that I have the privilege of being his mom.
But the real burning question is, what about that now 24-year-old from Malawi? Is he going to come and knock at your door and say, hi, mom?
I don't know. His name was Ephraim, and he was our first client in Malawi. And he was 16, or no, how old was he? I think he was 12, but he had the body of like an 8-year-old because he was so malnourished.
Yeah.
And he walked into our office and he pointed me out and he said, and then we followed up with him a couple months later, and he was happy and healthy. And yeah, I'll always remember that, him telling me he wanted me to adopt him. And I was like, I'm just a child myself.
Do you ever hear from him seriously or anymore,
No,
or
I
hear
don't.
about him? Yeah.
No, I haven't.
But I'll bet he'll never forget you because of all the things that you did. I've had, as a student teacher, I've had students who I taught, and years later, and I'd never recognize their voice. It's changed so much, but they come up and say, "Hey, Mr. Hinkson, do you remember me?" And it was this deep voice guy, and it is cool. But it's always nice to know that you make a difference, but you're not making the difference just to satisfy your own ego. You're doing it because you want to do good things. And it's always neat when you get to see the benefits of all that.
Well, and I think honestly, my life was changed more than maybe I changed other people's lives unintentionally. So I think other people impacted me just as much.
Yeah, well, and that's as it should be. You get the chance to have other kinds of experiences and so on, and that's how we learn.
Yes, I definitely agree with that.
So what kind of advice would you give to young aspiring fundraisers today that want to make a difference and are starting out just thinking they're going to conquer the world?
Oh, I love this question, and I get asked it all the time.
I'll bet you do.
Build a network and get a mentor. So I would say mentorship first. When I first got into fundraising, AFP, at least our local chapter, offers a mentorship program. Mm-hmm. So I joined, I'm one of those people, if I join something, I go all in. So I joined AFP and I did their mentorship program. And out of that place, and now an organization that I'm a board chair of, and just over the years, I've been able to build a network. So those relationships have helped me find clients now, but also they're just people that help you navigate the ups and downs and help you brainstorm ideas. So mentorship or coaching and a network of people that you can rely on.
One of the things that I've always done, and I always encourage people to do, especially, but not only when they're starting out a new job, but even on the job, is picture yourself as a student first, especially when you're starting out. You can be a student for a year. You can, as you pointed out earlier, ask lots of questions. And people mostly love to relate to people where they're asked questions and they can convey knowledge and help guide people. People love to do that. But I think that playing, if you will, the student card for your first year on a new job is a reasonable thing to do. But I also think that even the most experienced person, other people are going to come along with experiences and different perspectives that are just as relevant and may show you something that you didn't even think of. And so we should always be interested in learning and never think that we know it all.
And I think sometimes, when you're like focusing at something so hard, like you need that outside perspective to take you out of the bubble and help you give that new perspective. And I honestly, if you ask questions to people, like you said, people are like, I have people who they're busy. They don't need to meet with me, but they do. And I think that's the important part, is if you're going to take time with either a mentor or a network of people. I mean, obviously relationships are first and you want to make it authentic, but make it intentional. Like if you have come with questions to your mentor, come with goals that you want to work on, make it intentional. So it's a beneficial time for both you and the mentor.
And that's the real operative part about it. It's for both of you. And make no mistake, your mentor will be learning along the way as well, if they're any good at all.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I love to try to make people laugh. I know when I go through airports, I always try to make the TSA people laugh because they have such a thankless job. But even today on the phone, I had to call someone and ask a question. And when they answered, they of course didn't know me. They didn't know who I was. But the first thing they said is, so how can I help you? And I said, well, I'm looking for $1 million. Can you just shoot that right out? And that was the whole point, is that they laughed, and, we kind of went from there. And I really think we need to respect people more. People always ask me how much I will charge to give a speech. And I don't want to abuse anyone too much, but I always love to tell people, well, in 2016, Hillary Clinton got $250,000 for speaking to Goldman Sachs, and I think I'm worth at least as much as she is. Nobody's taken me seriously with that yet. Nobody said, no problem, we can give you that. Very disappointing,
Yeah, I definitely think humor is an important part, and treating people with respect. I always, my big thing is, like, if you're in a grocery store and it's taking a long time, you go to the cashier, you're next, and they always apologize. And I'm like, hey, it's fine. I try to go with grace instead of being like, I've been waiting here for 10 minutes. You can just figure it out. Because, they're getting that all day by other people. So if you can have that one kind interaction, you never know what that'll do for their day.
No.
For their year.
And it doesn't, and you don't need to know. Sometimes you will find out, and it always will be a positive thing, but you don't need to know. It's still important to do it.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, tell me, if people want to reach out to you and learn more about what you do, and maybe explore using your services and so on, how do they do that?
So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. It's Haley Cooper, CFRE. And
Haley is spelled
Haley, and then Cooper is Cooper. That's my married name. And also the savvyfundraiser.com. My business is the Savvy Fundraiser. So mostly on LinkedIn is probably where I hang out, and you can always connect with me, DM me, and I would love to chat.
Well, that is how we connected, and I'm so glad that we did. I really appreciate you coming on and being with us and spending an hour chatting about all this. We'll have to do more of it. When are you going to write a book about fundraising and all the things that you do?
Maybe in a couple of years when my kids are older, but someone did tell me that is on my growth trajectory, is to write a book. So
there you go.
Stay tuned.
Well, I believe everyone has stories to tell. And even if you need help writing it, it's worth doing. So I hope that you will do it. That'll be fun. You'll have to come back and tell us all about it.
That sounds great.
And we'll let you know when Live Like a Guide Dog comes out.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. You've been such a gift to me, and I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Well, let's stay in touch. And I hope that all of you listening out there will stay in touch as well. We really appreciate you listening. Haley and I both do. We'd love to hear from you. You know how to reach her, and you can reach me as well. You can email me, michaelhi@accessibe.com, or go to www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. And Hingson is Hingson. Love to hear your thoughts. Love to hear what you thought about our episode today. Hopefully it was positive and that you learned something and took something away from it. Wherever you are and however you're listening, please give us a 5-star rating. We really appreciate your ratings and your comments. And of course, Haley, for you and for any of you out there who are so inclined, if you know anyone else who ought to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, please let us know. We love to hear about more people. We're always looking to meet people. And my belief is everyone has a story to tell. So come and tell your stories with us. But again, Haley, for you, I really appreciate you being with us today, and hopefully we can do this again. So I just want to thank you again for being here.
Yes, thank you.